And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. Please join me and my guests on this exclusive interview. Iran's foreign minister has vowed a definitive and calculated response to the assassination of Hamas leader in Tehran, an act Iran blames on Israel. The killing, which took place on July 31st, has been described as an unforgivable violation of Iran's security and sovereignty. While Israel has neither confirmed nor denied responsibility, the incident has escalated the already volatile relation between the two nations. Joining us today on TVP World to shed light on the brewing tensions in the Middle East is James Bowden, a media consultant of Near East Observers. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here today.
So can you help us read this kind of statement made by the Iranian Foreign Ministry about its definite, and calculated response? In practical terms, what does that mean?
It's very hard to assess what that means. We've been spending a lot of time analyzing the statements by Iran and what it has and has not been doing. And right now, we believe that Iran is basically trying to put well, as we might say, put lipstick on a horse right now. You know, they're trying to make the best picture of a bad situation. We believe that they are not in a position to strike back at Israel right now. And so they're continuing to issue these statements, trying to keep everybody on edge. But right now, we just don't believe that they can take effective measures.
All right, a few months back, we saw Iran shooting hundreds of rockets at Israel, which have all been intercepted. And since then, things have died down somewhat. And a lot of the analysts have been telling us that perhaps this is more for really domestic consumption to kind of quell the voices inside Iran that perhaps they do want some sort of retaliation. Are we seeing a very similar situation right now?
I'm not sure, again, if it is for domestic consumption. With the large amount of rockets that they launched back in April, they may have actually depleted their inventory of missiles. We know that they are supplying the Houthis in Yemen. They're supplying Hezbollah. They supply the PMF in Iraq. They've also given a tremendous number of missiles and other military inventory to Russia. And so, again, we believe that they used a heavy amount of what they could back in April, and now what they've got to do is rebuild up their inventory and also consider the other actors in the neighborhood that they have to balance against.
All right, can you help us understand what the calculation might be here? As you mentioned, a lot of these organizations like Hezbollah have been supplied by Iran, even though they are looking at a dwindling supply of ordnance that they can use. Is there any particular reason why it would take such an action to kind of deplete its own resources when they know that there's tension brewing?
Well, I do believe that when Israel struck them in Damascus, that seriously mandated a response. They could not tolerate that happening, and if they had not responded to that bombing, then a lot of other embassies, Iranian embassies around the world would have, and especially in the Middle East, would have become victim to Israeli attacks. And embassies, though technically not supposed to be used for intelligence or planning purposes, often do become centers of that. And so the calculation was, we need to show that striking an embassy is absolutely off limits and cannot be tolerated. But as has been pointed out earlier, Israel has assassinated or supported other assassinations in Tehran and other parts of Iran. And so, you know, it definitely gives you pause to question, all right, what was so significant about this assassination? And do they, are they okay with some of these assassinations happening?
All right, like you mentioned earlier, Iran's perhaps not in a position for any large-scale retaliation when it comes to practical terms. But do you think there's any other form that Iran can pursue retaliation?
They could perhaps pursue cyber attacks. We know that they have been launching some cyber attacks, some of the more notable ones against Israel, and there have been cyber infiltrations of the Donald Trump and Kamala Harris campaign websites. We know that in the past they have tried to access American infrastructure, so that could be an asymmetric response. And I have encouraged many of my friends and family to have money, actual cash money on them, because they may try to shut down a banking system or debit cards or stuff like that and make access to purchases difficult. We know that Israel has done that to them, and they could definitely retaliate in that way. They could also renew terrorism, traditional forms of terrorism. And in fact, we have seen in Israel over the last month at least two what I would call prototypical terrorist attacks in Israel. And so that is a real concern that they may go back to that very traditional form of attack.
All right, something very interesting you brought up here. You would describe that as kind of prototypical action being taken. And of course, we do know that Iran and Israel has a very long relation of not getting along. So we look at it in a very alarming lens. But when it comes to escalation, how do you think this will shape out when it comes to, well, comparing to the baseline tension that's already in place?
That's a very good question, because for those of us that are watching this on a daily basis, sometimes even hourly, many times when other people are running around with their hair on fire, oh, it's a massive strike, it's a massive hit. We're looking at something that's very common, something that has been happening for quite a while. We know that there have been missile launches by Hezbollah, which have reached up to 60, 90, sometimes in the hundreds of missiles. Now, the majority of these are short range. And we have seen significant tensions along the northern Israeli, southern Lebanese border. And so it is a good question. How do you define escalation in an environment where the pitch is so high? Iran will not be able to, and would likely not be able to, roll tanks across Iraq and Jordan and towards Israel. We don't expect that to happen. And so, again, the only way that they could really ratchet things up is to launch another missile barrage against Israel.
And how do you think the international community, particularly the United States, EU, reacting to this tension that's going on right now? Is there anything that they can realistically do to smooth things over? Or do you think, again, this is, has been brewing for so long for a reason, right?
Right. Well, the international response seems to be very appropriate right now. We know that the United States has put in significant military assets into the region. And so massing all of the ships and men that they have has significantly, I think, caused Iran to take a pause, because they also saw a great number of their missiles knocked out on the way over to Israel the last time they did a barrage. And so they do have to think about the international response, particularly the Western response. But I also believe that they are considerate of the regional response. And so, and they're near abroad in the region. They did have a meeting with the OIC. And in that meeting, I don't remember any specific statements issued, but I'm sure that this topic was discussed, and they likely heard a lot of voices, particularly from countries like Jordan, Egypt, Kuwait, those types of countries who are saying, look, we really don't want you to go to war. We don't want you to push things much more with Israel. And let's see if we can address this issue in a much different way.
All right. One thing I'm also kind of interested about is the international perception of this conflict in the Middle East. Since the October 7th attack, in the initial phases of this conflict, internationally, people are more kind of looking at Israel in a more favorable light. And as the war in Gaza stretches on, there's a bit of shift when it comes to kind of international rhetoric. And where do you see things are right now with these new developments happening?
I think that Israel has gained, yes, a significant standing in the international community. They have survived a large number of attacks. They've survived a lot of diplomatic and international pressures through the international court. They have successfully struck back at the Houthis and demonstrated quite a bit of strength in that way. So Israel's reputation is, I think, growing in tremendous ways. Now, they do have some problems, and there are some issues that need to be rectified, and they definitely need to address some of the human rights issues that have gone on, especially with organizations like SOV-9, which were intercepting and destroying humanitarian aid. But I think that in general, there's a new approach to Israel, and one that Israel has a lot of strength.
So do you think, this announcement made by the Iranian Foreign Ministry in a more sort of calculated way has something to do with also, taking that into factor when it comes to kind of the international community's pressure that could be put on either Iran or Israel?
Oh, certainly. I mean, there's likely a large number of factors which have played a part in their lack of a response. They know that Israel is unchained right now. They used to look with one eye in a response to the United States and saying, are you going to hold us back? Should we do this or not? Now they're not. And now they are willing to go the full length in responding and retaliating. And so I think that Iran has to put that into its matrix, as well as the entire region. They're like, please don't put us in the crosshairs of Israel. And since the bombing in Damascus, there have been a lot fewer of these types of revelations of Iranian activity taking place that we didn't previously know of in these countries.
All right, last but not least, just your gut feeling. Do you think this will kind of sort of simmer down and turn into just some exchange of harsh statements, or do you actually see some actual conflict taking place in a more physical manner?
Well, when it comes to the Middle East, I never say never. Never entirely rule out anything, because the Middle East has a great tendency to beat and challenge your expectations. However, I do see Iran falling back into an old habit of waging war through statement. And so I think that the further we go away from a response, the less likely it is that we will see a response from Iran, and they will just increasingly try to sweep this situation under the rug. And, Iran always looks for a new justification for a strike against Israel. So about a month or two from now, we'll probably be back here looking at another crisis between Israel and Iran. And, it continues.
All right. Unfortunately, so thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. Thanks again for being with us on TVP World.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.